Laura, Owen and Korky, Paul. Winnie says cheese. Winnie, Andy, Tooth Fairy. Winnie and Wilbur were watching a wrestling match on telly and sharing a few snacks. Pull him over, shouted Winnie at the telly. She jumped up from the sofa. Go on, grab him. She shot out an arm to grab the air to show the wrestler how he should be doing it, but unfortunately Wilbur was in the way. Pow! Mrow! Wilbur's paw was over his mouth. There was a look of panic in his eyes. Oh, heck, Wilbur, said Winnie. Have I punched all your teeth out? Wilbur slowly took his paws away from his mouth. He opened his mouth and felt for each tooth with his tongue. They were all still there. Thanks Stinky Cheese for that, said Winnie. Shall I take you to Mr. Drillikins the dentist, just to check you over? Mrow-ow-ow, said Wilbur, hurrying up the curtains to get out of reach. All right, said Winnie. But you be careful. Those teeth might be loose. You suck a nice warm worm and frog's pond smoothie through a straw. I'll finish off the nibbles by myself. Winnie settled back on the sofa. Trip him up. Pull his hair, she shouted while she dipped an elephant's toenail into stinkwort sauce and popped it into her mouth. Choo-choo. Tickle him, she screamed as she took a licorice rat's tail and began to chew-chew-chew on that. But, suddenly, M-N-N, mumbled Winnie, her hand to her mouth. She stuck long fingers into her mouth and pulled out a tooth. Meow, said Wilbur, looking with interest. What am I going to do without this tooth? Asked Winnie, holding it up. I need this tooth. I can't talk properly without it. I'll look like one of them wrestlers on the telly. I'll never be beautiful again. And I'll starve to death. What that? Wilbur was nudging Winnie, offering her his straw. No, wailed Winnie. I don't want smoothies stuffed through a straw. But Wilbur had grabbed hold of the telephone book and was pointing at a phone number. No, wailed Winnie, even louder. I'm not going to Mr. Drillikins. Never. But Wilbur had one more helpful hint to try. He was pirouetting on his toes, his arms curved above his head and a soppy look on his face. What on earth? Asked Winnie. Then she got it. Oh, I know. You're being a fairy. Wilbur nodded enthusiastically. Of course, said Winnie. I can leave my tooth for the tooth fairy and get a whiff from her in exchange for the tooth. Oh, what'll I show off for my whiff, Wilbur? Actually, choosing her wish was easy. There was one thing more than any other that Winnie wanted just then. I must write a note to tell the fairy my whiff, said Winnie. Where my pen, Wilbur? Winnie scrawled with her pen. There. Looks good, doesn't it? Wilbur curled a lip and shook his head. Oh, stop looking at me like that, cat, said Winnie. You know I'm not very good at writing. I just thought a fairy might understand. Will you write it for me, please, Wilbur? Wilbur did write it, in his best poor writing. He wrote it very tiny and just right for a fairy. It said, Sweet dreams, Wilbur, said Winnie. Winnie was woken in the night by something tickling around her face. A tissue, sneezed Winnie. Then, pooh, she shouted. What that horrible smell? Then she sank back into snoring, snurr, phew, snurr, phew. The little tooth fairy smelled of summer breezes wafting over dew-fresh meadow flowers sprinkled with icing sugar and love. Nobody had ever said pooh to her before. She put her tiny fists on her teeny pink waist. She stomped weeny green-slippered feet across Winnie's pillow. She grabbed hold of a titchy handful of Winnie's tangle of hair and heaved herself up onto Winnie's cheesy white cheek. Then she took her wincy little wand and whack, she walloped it hard onto Winnie's great snoring mountain of a nose. "Eh? What?" said Winnie, sitting up. The fairy tumbled, but she flapped her incy-wincy mauve wings to flutter to where the tooth and the note were waiting for her. The tooth fairy held her meeny-miny wand to glow over the note, and she read Winnie's wish. And a minuscule wicked grin came onto her fairy face. Zip-zap went the wincy yellow wand and... Gulp! What was that?" said Winnie, feeling for her mouth. "Hey, Wilbur! Guess what? I've got my new tooth. I can say, 6 silly slugs sat sipping sausage syrup through straws. My wish has come true. Here, let me have a look." Winnie jumped out of bed and grabbed her wand. Abracadabra! Instantly the candles were lit and a mirror was gleaming with a come-hither look. Winnie arranged herself into a charming pose in front of the mirror. Then she smiled, and, oh, dear. Mrohiss! Wilbur scrabbled under the bed covers. "Oh, heck!" cried Winnie as she saw herself. "Whatever has that blooming fairy done? She's given me a fearful fong. I look a right fright." Winnie's eyes were darting here and there, looking for a fairy twinkle, and she spotted it, still on her pillow. "There it is," shouted Winnie. She swung her wand to swat it, abracadabra. Instantly the twinkle around the fairy was replaced by a buzz of midges around the fairy. But... zip-zap went the tiddly-tooth fairy wand. And instantly Winnie was covered in warts. Abracadabra! The fairy smelt of manure. Zip-zap! Winnie's skin turned blue. Abra-dash. "MMEOOWWW," interrupted Wilbur. He poked his head out from the covers and found something nestling under the pillow. It was something as tall as the tooth fairy and not perhaps quite as white as it might be, but Wilbur knew just what it was and where it was needed. He held it out to Winnie. "My tooth," said Winnie. "My very own dear tooth." "Oh, abracadabra!" And instantly Winnie's own tooth was back in her head, and the fong and the warts and blue had all gone. And so had the tooth fairy. "Well," said Winnie as she snuggled back into bed. "That just goes to show, doesn't it?" "Meow?" asked Wilbur. "It shows that if you want a wish doing, you'd better just blooming well do the wish yourself," said Winnie. "Meow," agreed Wilbur. "Itchy witchy." Winnie held the telling moan away from her ear and winced at Big Sister Wanda's voice. "Are you listening, Winnie?" screeched Wanda. "The Witch's Cat Show is tomorrow. I'm putting Wayne in for it, of course. He won it last year, you know. I've just had his teeth whitened. And highlights put in his fur." Wayne was Wanda's snooty sleek-as-a-panther cat. "Have you still got that scraggy old catty thing of yours?" asked Wanda. "What was he called?" "He's called Wilbur," said Winnie. "And he's lovely?" "Well, we'll all see just how lovely he is at the show, won't we?" "Hee," laughed Wanda. "No," said Winnie. "I wasn't going to." Hee," cackled Wanda. "I knew it!" "I said to Wayne, I bet Winnie won't dare to put that Wilbur in for the show because she knows very well he'll come bottom of the whole thing." Hee. "I just knew it." Winnie glared at the telling moan. "Well, you knew wrong, Wanda the Witch," she said. "The only bottom thing at the show will be your Wayne winning the competition for the cat who has the witch with the biggest bottom yours. Wilbur will be in the show."